On behalf of myself and Eliza, I want to turn this over to who are the lecture committee. I want to turn this over to Roxy, who is right there on my screen, and who is our fearless leader.
All right, thank you, Peter. And I will just take about a half a minute to say good evening and welcome to the first lecture in the Department of Landscape Architecture's Bracken Lecture Series. As Peter said, I'm Roxy Thoren. I'm the department head in landscape architecture here at Penn State. And the department's annual Bracken Lecture Series is made possible by the generous gift of Dr. John R. Bracken, head of the Penn State Landscape Architecture Department from the 1920s through the 1950s. The series began in 1982, and we've been bringing exciting and interesting speakers to our department each year to enrich the experience of the students and the faculty. The Bracken Committee, which is this year is Peter and Eliza, solicits ideas for speakers from both students and faculty, and we have a process where both students and faculty then vote on nominees. And the annual speakers bring to our campus some of the most innovative and engaging ideas in contemporary landscape architecture. So tonight we are delighted to welcome Claire Latané, and I will turn it over to Eliza for the official introduction.
Thanks, Roxy. So from one to the next, and eventually we'll get to Claire. Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor to introduce our speaker, Claire Latané. I met Claire about 5 years ago. I had seen her presentation at the end of her 2017, now this is a mouthful, Landscape Architecture Foundation Fellowship for Innovation and Leadership. Claire was one of 4 innovators and leaders chosen in the inaugural year of that exciting program. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention that our fearless leader, Roxy Thoren, subsequently was also a fellow in this program. But back to Claire. The presentation that I saw was titled, "For the Love of Teenagers, Advocating for Safe, Restorative High School Environments." And I got to tell you that was a real eye-opener for me. What a refreshing concept, I thought. A kids-forward approach to school design focused on their well-being and mental health and social interaction while creating environmental benefits too. I was also really drawn to Claire's background. She holds a BA in journalism and mass communication from the University of North Carolina and a professional master's in landscape architecture from Cal Poly Pomona. And after earning her journalism degree, Claire worked as a design writer, an activity that she continues today. And I hope she will at least mention her exciting 2021 book. Once she joined the landscape architecture world, Claire worked at EPT Design and subsequently at Studio MLA. And then she joined her alma mater, Cal Poly Pomona, as a faculty member. Today, Claire is a writer, an educator, and practitioner of landscape architecture. She is an associate professor and now the chair of landscape architecture at Cal Poly Pomona. Claire has helped launch local, regional, and nationwide initiatives to pair designers with communities to co-create, and I pause on that intentionally. That's the operative term, co-create, healthy schools that support mental health, equity, and climate resilience. I could say a whole lot more, but it'll be far more interesting when Claire tells you about her work. So please join me in warmly, though virtually, welcoming Claire Latané. Claire.
Thank you so much, everyone, for having me here. I had the opportunity to visit Penn State, I think 4.5 years ago now, and it was just a joy to meet the community and see your beautiful campus. And being a native from Ohio, it just will always, that part of the world always feels like home to me. So thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is that showing up for everyone?
Yes, it is.
All right, great. So tonight I'm going to be talking about presenting a collaborative model for designing with communities, and the theme stays true. A lot of this is about designing or co-creating with children and teenagers. This is a model that we've been practicing at Cal Poly Pomona's landscape architecture department for the last 4 years, but it really actually began when I was teaching for a semester in 2009. And I'll tell you about that. First, I want to establish the context of this work because so many people that have never been to Los Angeles just believe this myth that Los Angeles enjoys perfect weather. And also to illustrate that some community-led design strategies that I'm going to present tonight work anywhere, regardless of weather. And because my work is really focused on schoolyards and outdoor environments, I think that's a really important consideration. So most of you are probably really familiar with this diagram. Like most cities, our region in Southern California is packed full with buildings and pavement that heats up our city and suburbs. And this heat island effect results in city temperatures up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit or nearly 4 degrees Celsius warmer than in less developed areas. And in Southern California, the projections for the next, waiting for a helicopter to go by. The projections for the next nearly 100 years are many more dangerously hot days. The number of days over 95 degrees, which health experts agree becomes dangerous for human health, is expected to double over the next 80 years. On top of that, most of our drinking water comes from faraway places. Only a third of our water supply is local, and this really presents an ecological and social injustice. Not only that, but those faraway places depend on snow in order to provide enough water for Los Angeles. And because we are in a warming climate, the snowpack is shrinking, leading to further water insecurity. And like most places, we depend on oil and fossil fuels for our economic wealth. By 1930, California was producing nearly a quarter of the world's oil. Tremendous economic growth and planned obsolescence put consumption and profit over human and ecological health and plague our environment in multiple ways, from resource extraction at the beginning of the cycle to polluted air, waterways, soil, and beaches. And if that wasn't enough, Southern California is known for our 4 seasons: fire, mud, drought, and earthquake. After wildfire, which is more and more frequent, winter rains bring risk of mudslides and debris flows. A lot of this has been happening in the last couple weeks. We're in the midst of yet another record drought, ironically, putting crops, livelihood, and habitat at risk, and which also increases the risk of wildfire. And then there are the earthquakes. And then we add the social disasters. Today's generation of youth is defined by eco-anxiety, fear of school shootings and neighborhood violence, a global pandemic, and social uprisings against systemic racism. They are struggling with unprecedented levels of anxiety, stress, and depression. Our children and youth are in crisis. In 2021, 44% of high school students had experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. That included more than half of female students and 76% of LGBTQ+ students reporting persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. About 20% had seriously considered attempting suicide during the past year. That includes more than 1 in 4 female students and nearly half of LGBTQ youth. And teachers are struggling more than ever too. In a RAND research study recently, teachers reported nearly double the rates of job-related stress and nearly triple the rates of depression than other US adults. Schools are an opportunity. Schools are spread out evenly, distributed throughout neighborhoods, and where children and youth spend 15% of their lifetimes and the majority of their waking hours, making them the ideal place to become living, vibrant community resources that clean the air, clean our water, provide habitat and local food, create jobs, and bring communities together. The potential impact is significant. In California alone, over 10,000 public schools serve over 6 million students on 130,000 acres of public land. "50 years of research shows us that viewing and being in nature calms our breath, reduces our heart rates, reduces stress and anxiety, and brings communities together. And nature is especially helpful for people experiencing trauma. We can develop learning environments that benefit every student, teacher, and community member who walks into them, that support mental health and counseling programs, contribute to the curriculum, such as science and health standards, contribute and support restorative justice programs, and boost attendance and enrollment. We can design learning environments that heal. I've found 3 main design principles that support students' mental health and well-being, and these are presented in greater depth in Schools That Heal, designed with mental health in mind. They are to create environments that nurture a sense of belonging, to provide nature-full places, and to inspire awe, curiosity, or wonder. The 3 principles can help us design school environments that nourish and nurture our students and teachers, give them places for respite and places to be whole. And Schools That Heal can provide many benefits that save money in the short and long term. They reduce flooding and can increase local water supplies. They cool the air and surface temperatures by 20 to 45 degrees, reduce energy spent on cooling and heat-related illnesses. They reduce air pollution by as much as 60% and improve heart health. They protect us from skin cancer and promote healing. They increase safety and provide a greater sense of community, all of which save lives and money on social services and infrastructure. But tonight I'm going to share a little background on, really focus on this creating a sense of belonging. And one of the primary ways we can create a sense of belonging is to design with children and youth and teenagers. It will come as no surprise to many of you that we have a history of excluding children and teenagers from planning and designing the environments that shape their lives. Excuse me. And you're probably familiar with Sherry Arnstein's ladder of participation. It was first introduced in an article published in 1969 in the Journal of the American Institute of Certified Planners. And this ladder has become one of the most widely referenced, influential, and adapted models for democratic public participation. But what I didn't know until recently is that Arnstein's ladder came out of her work in juvenile justice and health. Born in 1930, Arnstein was the daughter of immigrant parents from Russia and France. They moved to Los Angeles when she was young, where she studied physical education at UCLA and then worked briefly as a social worker in a juvenile court. After working in community relations for a Washington, D.C. hospital, she worked on President Kennedy's Commission on Juvenile Delinquency. Here, her role was to help communities develop quality of life programs to improve job opportunities housing, and schools, all of which were seen as ways to improve the outcomes of children and youth. She became the chief advisor on citizen participation for President Johnson's new Model City program and for the entire US Department of Housing and Urban Development. Her guidelines brought neighborhood residents into planning and policymaking activities. But while Arnstein's ladder of participation has made significant impacts in the way we think and talk about community engagement in general, it has had little impact on the way we engage children and youth. When designing schools, the environment where children spend a majority of their waking hours, the process is most often like this, top-down and siloed. Students, teachers, school administrators, and those who develop the curriculum are left out of the school planning and design process. It would help if it would help school designers plan healthier, more functional school environments if we could break through those silos and engage those who use the school space while designing for them. And that could look something like this. Architects talk to principals, landscape architects talk to teachers and students. The facilities team at the school district talks to the curriculum team, none of which is happening in most cases today. Even better would be to completely reimagine the design process as a collaborative endeavor between the school community, students, teachers, school district decision makers, the design team, and the natural processes and systems that support us all. My introduction to the dire need for these restorative qualities in schools was through my children. In 2005, I moved to Eagle Rock, which was in Los Angeles Unified School District. And this was their first day of school, my older two children's first day of school at Eagle Rock Elementary, which they were very much looking forward to attending until we walked through the building and into the schoolyard, which looked like this. Students in Los Angeles, as in a lot of places, spend a lot of time on the schoolyard. In Los Angeles, they wait for their teachers to take them inside before school. They spend lunch outside. They spend recess outside, and a lot of them spend time outside in after-school activities too. And Eagle Rock Elementary isn't unusual. It's designed like most elementary schools in metropolitan areas. There might be large trees and grass along the parkway in front of the school, but the playground inside the school is mostly asphalt. And like I said, despite our reputation of having perfect weather in Los Angeles, we have high numbers of hot days and high levels of air pollution from major roads and freeways, which is made worse by a very short rainy season during the winter months. So you get 9 months out of the year, a chance for all that particular matter from the freeways that crisscross through our city to build up on asphalt surfaces, including in schoolyards. The asphalt absorbs heat too. My children would come home from school with gray bands around their wrists and ankles from the soot. And during the end of the year performances, children would literally rock from one foot to another, their shoes melting from the hot asphalt. In 2009, I taught a senior design studio using Eagle Rock and the elementary school as our site. Our students were learning about multi-purpose, nature-based design strategies. And Ms. Rush, my youngest son's second grade teacher, invited our students to teach her students how to read and draw maps and talk about watershed health. As part of the exercise, my students asked the third graders to reimagine their schoolyard. This one drew a farm with grazing area, a lake, a new bigger building to allow removal of the temporary portable classrooms, which you can see have red circles with lines through them and take up a lot of the yard space. This student drew more trees and a field of green with a pond, a garden, and a theater. 24 students drew what they envisioned for their school. And the vast majority of them featured variety and discovery and living things and little to no asphalt. The exception were those that asked for amusement parks or food courts. Our landscape architecture students then translated these students' drawings into nature-based concepts that would improve ecological and human health. This is one of those, the student groups. It featured an ecologically appropriate student-inspired variety of play areas that reveal and highlight natural systems for students to interact with and learn from. At the end of our studio, we presented the research and the design work to a group of parents and principals, the principal and teachers. And 2 years later, these 3 parents applied for and won a $349,000 state stormwater grant to remove the asphalt and replace it with low impact, multi-benefit design elements. The final design, which I had the opportunity to work on, was a collaboration between teachers, parents, students, administrators, and experts, including Dr. Marcy Rainey, shown here, who's a behavioral health expert. Before we designed the site, Dr. Rainey and her directed research students observed how and where students used the schoolyard and used motion monitors to measure students' activity levels. This information gave us an idea of which areas on the school ground were well used and which areas were not. So that big central space with park in the middle was an existing asphalt kickball diamond, and the least used area of the schoolyard was the circle-like space coming off of it. We were able to keep the areas that were really popular with students and well used, like the handball court, basketball court, and only focus on transforming the underused areas. And the design is a little bit funny. That shape of field is funny because we wanted to keep everything we could that was working. We didn't want to move the handball court, that's expensive. We didn't want to remove the kickball backstop, that's expensive. And we needed to have the whole kickball field, either grass or asphalt, so kids weren't tripping on their way back and forth. The design features a habitat garden in the lower right where a portable classroom was removed, a couple of new tree rows down north-south to throw shade east and west in the morning and the afternoon. And then a second outdoor classroom up here in the center was added after the first outdoor classroom in the middle of the habitat garden was so popular that students were begging for another one. After the schoolyard was transformed and as the design matured, Dr. Rainey and her students came back to observe and measure student behavior and activity levels in the new yard. Here's some images of what those spaces look like or looked like shortly after it was constructed. They found that Eagle Rock students spent more time in small groups in green play areas than asphalt play areas, which associated with more positive social interactions. Antisocial interactions, such as bullying, decreased by 40 to 50% after students were given time to adjust to the novelty of the new design. And physical activity went up too, significantly. 3 years after planting, the trees are providing shade, and the grasses and sages are just big enough to give the space a feeling of respite, of being somewhere far away, and invite students to engage in a variety of activities and creative play. Rainey found that she studied this schoolyard, but she also studied several others in comparison. And she found that the more variety in the physical design of the schoolyard, the higher the number of students were engaged in physical activity and positive social behavior, which makes sense. This work, amplified by my children's struggles with mental health and well-being, led to the fellowship that Eliza alluded to, and this book published by Island Press, and is ultimately what brought me back to Cal Poly Pomona to teach and continue to work with students on applying research on designing for public health, equity, and climate resilience. So when I returned to Cal Poly Pomona in 2019, I taught our second year graduate level Design for Complex Systems studio using school campuses in underserved neighborhoods as our sites. To find schools, I reached out to nonprofits and community members working on environmental justice and equity and asked them to put the word out for schools that would be interested in partnering with us to develop student-led campus plans. We received a lot of interest, and we had to choose just 3 schools because we had a relatively small studio. And these 3 schools, Cleveland High School, Bridges Academy, and Willard Elementary School, had at least one enthusiastic teacher to work with us and a group of students we could work with through the semester. While the concept of including students and teachers is simple, there's quite an art to practicing it. And we use design as democracy to guide our community-led design principles and actions. And Island Press donates a copy for each school community to use with us. I'm going to share a few examples of what our students' community-led design processes look like for each of these schools. Cleveland High School is a Title I high school. That means that the majority of their students qualify for free or reduced rate lunches in Reseda, a neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles County. They had a 50-member student leadership team that had organized themselves around the idea of becoming a green ribbon school, which highlights schools taking action toward climate resilience through infrastructure and curriculum. We partnered with that student leadership team and their faculty advisor with the support of their principal. And one of the things this student team was really excited about was our focus on mental health. That was a primary concern for them. And this was in spring of 2020, before the pandemic, just to give you ground this in time. Our Cal Poly Pomona students created a survey to collect Cleveland High School students' emotional responses to different campus spaces, because only students know how their campus makes them feel and which places work and don't work. And this is their survey. One of our students, Sarah Fisher, then mapped student responses to show the emotional geography of each space. And her results were interesting because you can see that the same space might make one student feel calm and another one bored or tense. And this goes back to Marcy's findings that variety is really important, because different people, depending on how our mood is that day or who we are, feel relaxed and calm in different types of spaces. Another student, Graham Goldditch, took a different approach to analyzing the responses, and he created diagrams to visualize which space were activated, shown at the top of each circle, versus deactivated, shown at the bottom of each circle, and which spaces students felt pleasant to the right of each circle and versus unpleasant to the left of each circle. So you might have, if the bars are longer on the right side, that's a pleasant feeling, and on the left side, that's an unpleasant feeling. And the visualization of that also shows quite a bit of variety from students, but some very strong patterns. They then asked Cleveland High School students to send them images of places they'd like to have on campus to do different activities. So the Cleveland High School students were basically creating their own image boards, their own design image boards. And these are the images that they sent to our students. This sheet shows places they'd like to be alone or quiet. This one shows places they'd like to spend time with friends, to do a group activity, to learn outside, to eat a meal, places where they'd like to go de-stress. The images are, as you can tell, full of nature, color, and variety that invite positive social interaction, as Marcy mentioned. And notice that only 1 or 2 of the images they chose are of existing schools. And I think that says a lot for what we are actually providing our children and youth. Our students conducted a physical site analysis and research phase as well, which they shared with Cleveland students for feedback. And this campus rain study and flooding study was done using images that Cleveland High School students sent them after a rainy day during the semester. And Los Angeles, when it does rain, we do have a lot of flooding issues. And then each of the Cal Poly Pomona students created a draft schematic plan, which they shared with the Cleveland students to get feedback, and then made changes and refinements to their schematic design package, which included all their research and analysis and case studies and community surveys with the students, principal, and teachers. And so Cleveland High School is using their design package to apply for grants and to help steer the landscape design around a major building renovation, which is currently in progress. The next school is Bridges Academy. This is a private school that serves 2E, or twice exceptional students. This means that these students have high academic ability and live with autism spectrum, sensory integration, or other disorders that hinder them from doing well in a traditional classroom. And the 8th graders in this school had an option to take a sustainable campus design class to partner with us in analyzing and designing their campus. There were also an architecture design teacher and an art teacher who led activities with their high school students to help us understand student experiences and needs. The Bridges Academy students led our students on a walking tour of their school, pointing out places they liked and places where there were issues. And then the Cal Poly Pomona students helped them draw out their observations on a site map, as you can see in that picture on the right. The Cal Poly Pomona students created word clouds of survey responses to reveal the most common outdoor campus qualities that students and teachers liked and didn't like. You can see pretty strong patterns. Other than the dome on the top left, which is a geodesic dome play structure, all of the liked elements are living: the lawn, the trees, the plants. This school has chickens and dogs. Students said friends, and the answers are pretty similar between students and teachers, what they liked and didn't like. And then our students, this plan is done by our Cal Poly Pomona student, Robert Douglas, who captured some important design considerations for twice exceptional students with his concept of peer connect. Peer standing for provide places to play, express oneself, experiment, rest, and connect with others to create environments that foster physical, emotional, intellectual, and creative growth. The third school that we worked with that semester was Willard Elementary School, which is a Title I school in Pasadena that was introduced to us by a parent volunteer who was in charge of maintaining a large native garden. She connected us to the principal, who then connected us to a second grade teacher, Mrs. Grabus, who led an after-school green team of about 30 students of all ages from 1st through 5th grade. And this, you can see in this image, our students are working with that green team. The Cal Poly Pomona students first asked the green team to take them on a walking tour of their campus, asking them to show them their favorite and least favorite spaces, and pointing out any issues like flooding, where it got too hot, where they like to be when it is hot. And our students created a child appropriate survey for the elementary students, and then helped the students write and draw what they liked and didn't like about their school's outdoor spaces. This is one example. They then quantified the students' responses by mapping the most liked, and least mentioned outdoor spaces as one of their analyses. And they also created a teacher survey and graphed teachers' responses to questions like what would they like in the schoolyard and whether they would teach outside if given the right settings. And then after their research and analysis phase was complete, they too did a draft schematic plan, shared it with teachers to share with their students and get feedback. We got really good feedback from teachers and community members during the draft design plan phase. And then they developed their nature-based campus landscape plan. This is Michelle Shanahan's plan, which centered on experiential learning and nature play and took advantage of an area of campus that always flooded in the rains to create an ephemeral arroyo or stream. After our school design studio, we introduced the principal to a local nonprofit that implements watershed healthy designs for schools, who wrote a grant proposal for $300,000 and received it. This is their grant proposal, and they used a lot of the same ideas and proposals that our students had come up with. That led us into, during that semester, we were interrupted about 2/3 of the way through by COVID-19. And as probably all of you experienced as well, we went home on Friday, March 13th, expecting to come back in 2 weeks, and then weren't back in school for a year and a half. During that time, I was working with Green Schoolyards America founder Sharon Danks, who had created this national COVID-19 outdoor learning initiative with 3 other nonprofits. And their mission was to support schools and districts around the country in their efforts to reopen and safely and equitably use outdoor spaces as strategic, cost-effective solutions to increase capacity and provide access to fresh air. The initiative was really focused on equity to improve learning, mental and physical health, and happiness for children and adults. And it was inspired by examples that had taken place 100 years before during the Spanish flu and flu pandemic, where people had done the same thing. They had started taking schools outside. As part of this initiative, I founded and organized the Emergency Schoolyard Design Volunteers. And we invited landscape architecture and design professionals, academics, and students from around the country to volunteer their planning and design skills to help schools plan temporary outdoor learning spaces. We organized ourselves by climate regions, as you can kind of see here, and we created some easy to use tools for the design volunteers. We had design volunteer training online through webinar. We had templates for site analysis, and we matched landscape architecture and design students with more seasoned professionals or faculty so that they would receive mentorship in the process. In the course of 1 year, we received around 250 requests from K through 12 schools from 43 states. And we received volunteer signups from 338 people, representing 29 colleges and 145 firms or organizations. We helped around 125 schools with site planning and assessment, and demonstrated a tremendous need for design help in schools nationwide, but also this real strong potential for volunteerism in landscape architecture departments. Of the volunteers, 29 colleges and universities were represented, mapped here, as you can see, spread across the country. And when the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative kind of shifted gears and went back to planning more permanent outdoor spaces, the Emergency Schoolyard Design Volunteers ended the program. And we decided to build on that momentum when it ended by establishing a national collaborative for healthy and inclusive learning environments at Cal Poly Pomona to address systemic inequities of public education. And we wanted to address systemic inequities in multiple ways by connecting higher education programs to Title I low-income K through 12 students to co-create grant-ready school designs like we had been practicing, by providing resources, training, and a national network of experts, by expanding representation of marginalized groups in the design fields, by engaging K through 12 students in design, and to create a library of school design case studies to guide schools and districts across the country. And we've made a little progress. We've been a legitimate entity for about a little over a year, and we've made progress on providing resources, training. Last year, we started a Chile speaker series. Chile stands for Collaborative for Healthy and Inclusive Learning Environments. So we started a Chile speaker series, which invites experts on public health, belonging, community-led design, equity, climate justice, and other topics to come speak to our students and our community partners. We record these talks and post them on our Chile website so that people can access them anytime. We've made progress. We would like to think we're making progress in expanding representation of minoritized groups in design, although we might not know for a long time. We're committed to working with schools and organizations that serve children and youth in underrepresented and historically marginalized communities to introduce them to landscape architecture and the design fields as potential careers. Working with landscape architecture students helps them to reimagine their schools, which helps them to maybe see themselves as future designers with the ability to improve their community. But it also helps them feel valued and heard, which strengthens a sense of belonging and well-being in school. We're expanding our capacity to connect higher education programs to Title I K-12 schools. Last spring, we launched a pilot Chili Studio, which will become the model for an open curriculum that educators across disciplines can use as a jumping off point. 5 undergraduate and graduate studios partnered with 5 community organizations and school districts in a vertical studio setting where undergrads and graduate students could work together, not the whole semester, but we came together at certain points, similar to professional practice, where you might have 2 years experience and be working with people with 5 years or 10 years or 20 years experience, and everyone's experience is relevant and helpful. Many of our students, we encouraged our undergraduate students, many of whom are first generation college students, to think about graduate education as a viable option for themselves. So we're sort of setting up this pipeline. K-12 students are introduced to undergraduate students who are like them, and then our undergrad students are introduced to graduate students who are also like them. The Chili Studio is also an opportunity for students to practice community-led design in a nurturing environment where they can support and bring joy to K-12 students. Unlike some of them, because doing community-led design or student-led design in schools is by its nature supportive. Educators, K-12 educators support and understand the needs of our college and graduate students. It's also an opportunity to introduce and support school districts in the processes and benefits of community-led design, because most school districts lack the capacity or expertise to engage their teachers and students in design. This focus on schools helps students rethink the everyday environments they grew up in as opportunities to support human and ecological health, environmental and social justice, and climate resilience. And it also helps us understand and advocate for environmental literacy in youth, and allows us to explore nearby sites that demonstrate the natural and human systems that preceded modern development. At the end of the semester, we held a big celebration and exhibition. We brought together our community partners to campus to see the students' final posters and to meet each other, because they are sharing similar goals and can become support systems for each other. The students shared their final design work with their community partners in a series of posters, which our community partners then took back to their schools, districts, and organizations to share and raise funds to implement. And then we also sent them a digital design package with the complete semester's worth of work, research, analysis, community engagement, and design options. And the Chili Studio to date has amplified the voices of around 100 K-12 students. We've made co-created plans for 19 school sites and 2 organizations. And we have an additional 5, I think we actually have 6 now, community partners lined up for this spring. We've introduced 165 landscape architecture students to participatory design, and we've inspired over $2.5 million of grant funding. We have the potential to assist schools, districts, and organizations with community-led evidence-based design to support mental health, public health, equity, and climate resilience, and expand representation of minoritized groups in the design fields, support schools and organizations looking for outdoor or experimental or experiential learning opportunities. And the more I've been working this past 2 years, the more I think we really need this in our colleges, our universities as well. Our next steps include developing curricula for landscape architecture, education, and other disciplines that can be shared openly to other faculty, and to create a community hub for a national network of experts to support their efforts working with and amplifying the needs of their communities. And we'd love to, if any of you have worked with schools or are teaching a class on participatory design with communities, we would love to help to share that if you would like it to be shared on our website by writing about case study or a curriculum or both. The US has, this is just tying it all together, the US has over 97,000 public schools, 48 million students, 2 million acres of school sites, and I think about 100 landscape architecture programs. And that's what's represented here in the blue, dark blue dots are universities with landscape architecture programs. So imagine the potential if each of our programs began partnering with area schools to support mental health and improve public health and close equity gaps and build climate resilience and support environmental literacy and career technical education. Our children and teenagers need and deserve to be included in design that makes their schools healthier places to be. And I think actually we all deserve the results of that. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Claire. That was absolutely amazing. Really, really inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I haven't even been paying attention to questions, but I'd love to answer.
That's
anything.
okay. I will deal with that for you. So we have, first question that we have is, what's your view about the intergenerational playground concept? I mean, a playground that can serve the elderly along with children.
You know, I mean, my view is great. When I was growing up, you didn't have fences around playgrounds and signs that said you had to be a parent with a child to go into a playground. But I also think that our model of playground here in the US and probably in a lot of places is really limited. Like I'm pretty vocally against plastic play structures in rubber surfacing. They're just, you know, they're climate toxic. They're toxic to human health. They get too hot. They're pretty limiting in what they invite students or children to do. And they're limiting in that they're designed for particular ages. So as you grow out of that 2 through 5 age, you know, and the 5 through 12 age, which is where most of them are designed to accommodate, then the teenagers get left out and other people in the community get left out. I think that I would be really interested in if somebody would just take on as their pet project natural play spaces and really pushing the envelope there. I have to say that, like, most schools that are finally doing this work end up looking really similar. Like we get a lot of logs and stumps, and then you just have schools with the same thing all over the place. Logs and stumps, they're great to play on, but you need more variety. And I think we're just at the beginning of exploring that, of exploring what could happen with natural materials, climate friendly materials, non-toxic materials, local materials, found objects. I think there's just so much opportunity there, and schools tend to be a place where people just do what's easiest, or districts are worried about being sued, so they just kind of pick something out of catalog, understandably, so that they don't have to think too hard or worry about lawsuits from children falling off of things or getting a splinter. That was a very long rant to your question.
No, that's perfectly okay. I'm gonna toss another question at you. This attendee says, "Thank you for this great presentation. Are there ways to engage teens and children in the community design process outside of school design?"
Yeah, that's a great question. That more and more, I'm seeing more and more nonprofits are working to engage children. Like a lot of the nonprofits that I know here that are working on park design, for instance, will have special activities for children. And cities as well are starting to do that. But I think that they really need encouragement. And one of the ways to encourage nonprofits and cities to engage children is for all of you, when you get out into practice, you might end up in private practice, you might end up at a city agency or a nonprofit organization, you know, take it upon yourselves to be as creative as you want to be in how to engage children. School is an easy place to engage children. And in fact, it's probably one of the easiest places, because with community engagement, one of the most challenging things is to get people to show up. We're busy. The more stressed a person's life is, the more they're worried about staying housed or making money, the less likely they're going to show up to a community meeting. So schools are good places, not just for working with students, but also for working with parents as they come pick up their children, or if they have back to school nights. And we've been really successful in that as well.
So here's another. Do you think these playground concepts could be put into practice in juvenile detention centers or even adult places of incarceration to ensure a healthy environment to breathe and exercise?
That's a really good question. And actually, one of our partners this spring that I'm really excited about is the California Institute for Women, the women's prison. And they have an outdoor family visiting area. But right now it's like, I went to visit, it's like 3 picnic tables under a shelter, and then a little, I think a little plastic play structure and a bed of rubber in the middle of one of the hottest places in Southern California. And there's no life, there are no trees. It's surrounded by 12-foot fence with barbed wire on top. You can see the security people. So it's going to be really interesting to work with them and see what kinds of solutions our students can come up with the women prisoners. And we're hoping to work with their families too, but we'll keep you posted.
That sounds really exciting. Okay, another question. You ready? What kind of bureaucratic barriers have you experienced, if any, in the cross-disciplinary processes of your project?
Cross-disciplinary, I mean, bureaucratic, what was the word?
Barriers.
Barrier is the right word. You are gonna run into that in working with most school districts. I mean, we're often working with one of the most famously hard to work with school districts in the country. LA Unified School District is just famously hard to work with. It's second only to New York City in number of schools in size. And school districts are, they were formed, I want to say they're steeped in this 100-year tradition of industrialized education, and it's really hard to turn that ship with any bureaucracy. But then you add to that concern for children's safety and welfare, and there are a lot of conflicting ideas about what that is. So this is where it's really helpful for students, faculty, professionals to advocate for this, to share this research that being in nature calms students down. You're not going to get worse behavior just because you have a tree a student can hide behind. Like, that's the concern. If we put in bushes, the students will hide behind them and get in trouble. But the research doesn't show that. The research shows the opposite. And, like, I had the kid that was I was getting phone calls from my son's principal, like, he's climbing the fence again. He's behind the shrub again on the wall, and I'm like, well, you don't have any other interesting thing for him to do there. So I understand they're worried about safety, but they need our help. If you think about the barriers this way, the barrier is a challenge, is a really fun challenge for you to overcome. How can you figure out a way to communicate with the team, whether that's the district team, architecture, curriculum, facilities, or whether that's your own design team, figure out neat, interesting ways to communicate these ideas so that people just don't have to, it's just a no-brainer. That's a good challenge.
Thank you. And one more. What is your favorite example of a mental health oriented landscape?
Well, my favorite example, because I'm a homebody, is my backyard. My backyard. But when we got put onto Zoom for a year and a half, one of the things I was so excited about was about teaching was not being on the computer as much, because in practice, you go through phases. Like, you might be out in the field doing site analysis and meeting people, but then you go through phases where you're just like on the computer for hours at a time, working out those designs. And that can be fun, but I was really burned out. And so teaching, I thought I wouldn't have to be on the computer except to answer email. And then we got pandemic. And then we had COVID. So, but just like, I heard the other day, a friend of mine, I think it was like the first month of COVID, I was sitting in my son's old bedroom, because we only have a 2-bedroom house, and he set up a bird bath out front, in front of the window, so that I could watch the birds come in and keep it watered and work with them. And that was really a joy for me. I started birding seriously during the pandemic. And I think that honestly saved my mental health. My students would catch me looking out the window and finding fun birds to look at. And I heard from a friend of mine a couple of days ago that birdsong, she's supposed to send me the article. I think she did. Birdsong was found, like seeing or hearing, I think it was hearing birds, improved people's sense of happiness by 30% or something. You're nodding, Eliza. Have you seen that study?
Yeah, I read that too. Yep.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all, because I'm just really happy when I hear birds. So anywhere with birds.
Well, thank you so much, Claire. We are so appreciative that you were able to join us, even if it was only virtual. Sorry about the computer part. Thanks to all our participants. So glad you joined us. Thanks to Peter and Roxy. And tune in next time, folks, when Christina Hill will be here in residence in that Stuckeman jury space. She's our Bracken Fellow, and she'll be speaking to us on February 22. But for now, I just want to say, Claire, thank you so very much. We are delighted to host you, and we look forward to you visiting us again.
Thank you so much. And if you'd like to send me the rest of the questions, I'm happy to answer via email. And thank you so much for inviting me. It was great to see all of you.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody, for attending. See you.